What should you do between your marathons? How do you make the most of the time between the fall and the spring? Winter is here and it is getting cold and snowy in many parts of the states. I'm bundled up today with two sweatshirts and a hat because it's 27 degrees outside and kind of cold in my house too. Today is going to be a Q&A episode here on the Knighton Runs podcast. Last week, I asked for questions within the Knighton Runs Training Group, and I got 9 great questions from Scott within the group. And I figured I'm going to record an episode here going into detail on all of them. We're going to talk, about what to do between your marathon training cycles this time of year. We're going to talk about training through the winter. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm up to since Chicago and what I'm looking forward to in the coming months ahead. And a whole bunch of other questions here that I think are going to be really helpful for all of you folks listening who are wrapping up your fall marathon training cycles now and either dreaming about what you're going to do next spring or gearing up for it already. Thanks for tuning in to the Knighton Runs podcast. This is Coach Chris, and I'm happy you're here. Today's episode is brought to you by the Knighton Runs Patreon. So if you're enjoying the show and you would like to support it, you can go to patreon.com/KnightonRuns, and your contributions give me a lot of encouragement to keep this going. You can also submit your questions if you'd like them answered here on the show. Anyone who signs up, you can get a Knighton Runs sticker, you get a digital copy of my book, and your questions answered here on the show. And I actually met someone at a local race recently who told me they really enjoyed this show and they enjoy listening to it on their long runs. That kind of feedback is awesome. Sometimes when you make these podcasts, you just put them out into the void and you don't really know who's listening. So it's great to hear that folks are getting enjoyment out of it, and I hope you are too. All right, so let's get into it. This, again, is going to be a Q&A episode with questions that I got from the audience, and we'll just get into it. So Jason asked, how was your Thanksgiving, and how was your first race since Chicago? Also, congrats to your wife, Erica, on a great race. Yeah, so Thanksgiving was good. It's December 8th as I record this, and we went up to visit my parents in Maine. They moved to Maine when I was in high school, and I pretty much have been independent since leaving high school. And I go up and see them a couple times a year. They're about a 5-hour drive away now, so I don't see them too often, but it's always nice when I do. The bummer thing about going up there is there's not that many great places to run. So I took a few days off, and then when we came back, we actually did a turkey trot race the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And yeah, that was my first race since Chicago. It was a 5K in Barrington, Rhode Island, which is the hometown of my wife. And my wife, Erica, did awesome. She actually ran a new PR. She ran 18:57, breaking the 19-minute barrier on the roads for the first time, and finished second overall, just behind the first place female. It was awesome to see. She's in great shape now. Our daughter is about 1.5 years old, and it's really cool to see that she's running faster than ever now. As for me, I felt pretty good. I really enjoyed myself too. The 5K is an awesome event. I love it. It might just be my favorite distance to race. So I'm always excited when I get to do one. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing a few more in the upcoming months. I ran pretty well for me, 17:04. My PR is around 16:48, I think it is officially. So I'm not too far off of that. Whenever I run a 5K now, I always try to break that 17-minute barrier, and I didn't quite have it after Thanksgiving, but for my first race back with minimal training, I'm pretty happy with that, and I'm excited for what's going to come up in the coming months. As for me, for the coming months, I'm going to focus on getting faster. So my next marathon will most likely be in the fall of 2023, And I know that if I want to PR in that, I need to get a lot faster. I also really enjoy racing shorter races. As much as I love training for the marathon, I love the competitive aspect of pushing myself and competing with others in distances like the 5K and even shorter. I'm also a high school coach, so I get very jealous when I see my athletes racing on the track or racing cross country. So this season, I'm going to be signing up for a whole bunch of 1 mile indoor track races, and I'm going to try to run my fastest mile. My fastest mile was set in 2019 when I ran 450 at Heartbreak Hill Running Company outdoor track race, and it was awesome. I've tried to break that time a bunch since 2019, but haven't been able to quite do it. I've run under 5 minutes a lot, but haven't been able to get down to 450. A lot of 455s, 457s, 459, but getting under 450, I haven't been able to do. That said, I've never really focused on it. So for the next 3 months or so, I'm really going to focus on the mile and to a lesser extent, the 5K with my training. And I really want to get faster at shorter distances. I know that if I do that, it's going to be a fun change of pace and it's going to stimulate my body in the way that I need so that when I go back to marathon training later next year, I'm going to be faster and I'm going to be able to carry that short distance speed that I built into the longer distances like the half and the marathon, which, I'll most likely do in the fall of 2023. I actually have a new training program called the Run Your Fastest Mile training program. And I haven't promoted that too much yet, but it is available on my website. Just go to knightonruns.com and go to the training program section, and you can check it out if you're interested. Next question is actually a set of questions that was submitted by Scott. So thanks, Scott, for submitting these. You gave me some great content here. And if you're listening to this and would like to submit questions to have answered on the podcast as well, you can join on my Patreon page at patreon.com/KnightonRuns. And I'd be happy to help you out on here. All right. So Scott's first question, he says, since the fall season has ended and spring marathons are still too far away to start a formal plan, should I be one, trying to maintain some of that fitness and speed with occasional tempo work, or two, just focus on ramping up my slower, easy-based mileage? It's a great question. What should you do between marathon training cycles? First off, I'm really happy that you have an extended period of time between cycles. I don't love it when people just go directly from one marathon to the next, to the next, to the next. It's important to take time, a month or two, maybe 3, between marathon training cycles. For one, it gives you enough time to rest. If you haven't already taken 2 weeks of rest since completing your last marathon, do it now before you get into your next marathon training cycle. 1.5 to 2 weeks of rest is super important. And I mean, no running at all during that time. And then as for what types of runs you should do, I think that you could do one of two things. If you think you're mostly limited by your mileage, like if you haven't gotten your mileage higher up to the higher levels you want it to be, you could use this time to do an extended base building phase. You could work on increasing your mileage. That way, when you start your marathon training cycle, you'll enter it at a higher mileage and you can go even higher as you approach your marathon. Since increasing your mileage is the best thing that a well-rounded athlete can do to improve their marathon performance, that's a great option. The other option is use it to work on your speed. And earlier I mentioned I have a mile training program that I just released. It's called Run Your Fastest Mile. This is a great program to do in the time between marathon training cycles. And this is often what I give to the athletes who I coach one-on-one when they're in this situation. If you think your biggest limiting factor is your pure speed, if you think that you're slow, or if you think that you're not that fast, and that is your main limiting factor, then take some time to work on getting faster. One of the best ways that you can do that is to focus on really short distances, like the 1 mile distance. Do things like short track workouts, repetitions at mile pace, and fast fartleks, things like 20 minutes of alternating between 1 minute fast, 1 minute slow. And maybe in that 1 minute segment, you're going 1 mile to 5K pace based on your effort. Those are great things that you can do for like a period of a month to get a lot faster before you then need to jump into a marathon training cycle where you're primarily going to be focusing on building your endurance. Hope that helps. Scott's next question, he says that he purchased and downloaded my marathon training program and has a couple of questions about it. So first off, thanks. And he's looking to use it to train for the Toronto Marathon on May 5th. So he's wondering, what's the best way to modify it to peak at 70 miles per week? Easiest way to do that. So my marathon training program peaks at about 60 miles per week. The easiest way to increase it to 70, if you want to go higher, is to simply add about 1 mile to each of the runs, 1 to 2 miles to each of the runs. Scale them up in that way. I would not recommend increasing the length of the workouts. And by length, I mean the hard segments of the workouts, but add additional easy miles. So extend the warm-ups, extend the cool downs, and you could make the long run 1 or 2 miles longer each week of what's in there. If you take the entire plan, the 60 mile per week version, and add like 1 mile per run, 1 to 2 miles per run on every single week, that's a good way to do it for the 70 mile, to make a 70 mile version of that. The next thing he says for kind of modifying one of my training programs is, can I shift my long runs to Sunday? And yeah, that's totally fine. The complete marathon training program I have on my website, the long run is on Saturday, but you can definitely switch that to Sunday. I actually view Saturday and Sunday as completely interchangeable in my training programs, as well as with the athletes who I coach one-on-one. There's a lot of advantages to being flexible with when you do your long run, to incorporate your long run into your life. It's the longest run of the week. Some days, some weeks you're going to have things going on, and it's just easier for you to fit in a longer run on a Saturday or Sunday or vice versa. Also, weather. It's the winter right now. It could be snowy or cold and terrible on Saturday, but perfect on Sunday. Just switch it. It's fine. And as long as you're getting an easier day, the day after, you're going to be okay. And my training programs, Monday is always an easy day or a rest day. So that's fine. Scott's next question, he asks, what are your thoughts on using a fall half marathon PR to determine a goal time and determining training paces for a spring marathon? Do those calculators really work? And whose is best? Yeah, that's exactly how I would do it. So you want to look at what was your most recent race performance that you think is reflective of your current level of fitness. If it was a fall half marathon, now we may be a few months removed from that potentially. So maybe you could assume you're going to be a slightly slower, but for the most part, I would take whatever your most recent race performance was, plug that into a calculator. I actually have a calculator on my website. Go to knightonruns.com/calculator, plug in your half marathon finish time, and it's going to spit out an estimated marathon time, as well as training paces for all the different workouts that I have in my training programs, and give you estimated paces for things like 1 mile, 5K, 10K, half, and marathon. And they're pretty accurate. Especially if you put a half marathon time into it, then distances close to that, like the 10K in the marathon, will be pretty accurate. Distances a little bit further away, like the 5K and mile, they might be a little removed. Likewise, if you plug like a 1 mile or a 5K time into one of those calculators, the marathon time might not be super accurate because they're kind of far apart distances. But it's actually pretty accurate in general. The one thing I will say is that all of the races, distance races from 1 mile to half marathon, those you can always kind of assume you'll be able to run those times. Um, the marathon is very different from everything shorter than it. The marathon is very, very different from the half marathon. It's very different than anything shorter than the half marathon. Um, a lot of people struggle to run as fast as those calculators predict they can in the marathon. However, if you're properly trained for the marathon, you have good weather conditions, and you run a smart race, you can achieve those times. Scott's next question. He says, your marathon plan doesn't include a half marathon race in the build up to the full marathon. Do you have any thoughts on adding one in? And maybe would it be better to do one in January right before starting this plan? That's a great question. Yeah. So I don't put specific dates for doing races in my marathon training program on my website. I just have your finish date of like when your marathon is. However, you should do what I call tune-up races in the preparation of getting ready for your marathon. What I recommend is 4 weeks to 8 weeks prior to your marathon, something in that range, 4 to 8 weeks, 1 to 2 months, find a half marathon to do. And then whatever date you choose for that, back off about a month and do something like a 10K in distance. So what this means is you're going to start your marathon training. You're going to go through your base building phase. You're going to start doing some speed workouts. Then you're going to do a 10K. If you can't find a 10K, it can be a 5 mile. It can be a 5K. It could even be a 10 mile. But 10K is my favorite distance to start with. When you run that 10K, you're going to get a good sense of your fitness and how your training is progressing so far. Plug the result of that into the calculator I have on knightonruns.com/calculator, and that's going to update what your training paces should be until your next race. Then you train for another month or so, run your half marathon. Hopefully that goes well, and you can plug the results from that half marathon into the calculator again and update the paces again. And then based on the results of that half marathon and the estimated pace and finish time for your marathon that it provides you, that is what you should then target as the most aggressive pace for your marathon. So if you run a half marathon time and the projected marathon equivalent, let's just say, for example, is 3 hours and 30 minutes, the most aggressive you should plan to be in your marathon is 3 hours and 30 minutes. I will say, like, again, that projection from half to marathon sometimes is a little aggressive. So if you back off of that by like 5 minutes or so, that would be a much more conservative pacing strategy. But I've had plenty of people run what is their projected time as well. The biggest challenge with the marathon, though, is hitting the wall. And this is something that you only experience in the marathon. People don't really experience it so much in the half, and you don't experience it in the shorter distances. Hitting the wall and the effects of that plays a huge role in your finish time in the marathon. But basically, your estimated time that a calculator would provide would be like, how fast could you run if you didn't hit the wall at all, if you ran a perfect race? Scott asked if he should do a half marathon right in January, right before starting marathon training. I would say no, don't do that. You're not going to be prepared to run a good half marathon at the beginning of marathon training. And, just use whatever you said. You ran a half marathon in the fall. I would just base your paces off of that and maybe go slightly slower if you don't feel like you're quite in that shape. And until you do like that 10K I mentioned, just go off of those paces. If you do want to do a race to get started, I would recommend doing something like a 5K. So at the beginning of this episode, I mentioned I just raced a 5K in November. You could use something like that before you get into your marathon training cycle. Scott's next question, he asks, what type of questions are best to cover with you in a one-on-one session? So if you don't know, I do offer one-on-one consultations. You can go to knightonruns.com and up in the menu under coaching services, you can go to consultations if you're interested in booking one with me. You know, this is something that I think is really helpful if you're following one of my training programs and you just want to have some FaceTime with me. You know, if you want to spend half an hour digging into how you're feeling about training, how's it going, if you want to make a strategy for an upcoming race, if you want to talk about what's worked well in the past or maybe what hasn't worked and what you want to change going forward, these are great things to set up a call with me and we can discuss. You know, if you downloaded my training program is great if you follow it to a T, but most people are going to need to modify it a little bit. You know, if you want to spend some time talking about the program and how to best modify it to fit your needs, we can do that and make it into a fully customized program for you. So those are some ideas and those are ways that I help folks one-on-one with consultations all the time. If you're listening and you're interested in that, just go to my website and go up to the menu and you can find information about consultations. So then Scott's next question, he has any audiobooks or podcasts that you enjoy while logging the miles? So I'm actually not listening to anything at all anymore. My first few years of running, I didn't listen to anything. I would just go out and run without headphones. And, you know, then there was a period of time where I got maybe a little bored with just running with no music in my ear, no books and no podcasts in my ear. So, you know, over the first 4 years of growing Knighton Runs, I listened to a lot of business podcasts, a lot of business audiobooks, just learning how to get this off the ground and get it started and, you know, be able to provide the best content for you all listening and be able to help you most with your running. I learned a lot. That gave me a lot of motivation. You know, I would come home with a new idea every time. And I think running would put me into the state of mind to be creative and want to incorporate new ideas to improve my business. So, you know, that was usually what I would listen to. Right now, though, I have kind of stopped listening to stuff. And now that my wife is pretty busy right now, and the hour or two I get out running each day is a nice time to just relax and not listen to anything, not have any sensory inputs outside of just what's around me and the environment. So yeah, not doing anything right now. I think if you are someone who always runs with music or a podcast or an audiobook, it's a great thing to go without it. All right, so we got 3 more questions from Scott, and they all have to do with running in the winter. It's December 12th as I'm recording this right now, and thankfully there's no snow here yet in Rhode Island, but it is getting cold. I know in many parts of the northern hemisphere, you're already inundated with snow and ice, and more is coming. The winter weather can make it challenging for running, but there's a lot of great things about running year round and running in the winter too. I personally love getting out in the cold air. Today was a sunny day. It was like 29 degrees, but it just felt awesome out there on the track. Scott asks, when the winter weather is terrible though, is doing the same workout on a treadmill just as good? I think that it is at least 90% as good. Especially if it's a tempo run, it's probably identical. I will say that when it comes to marathon training, you want to do your best to try to get your long runs actually outdoors. There's no substitute for covering long distances outdoors and moving over terrain up and down hills and feeling the elements. If you only trained on a treadmill before a marathon, I'd be a little uncertain about what you could do. But as a substitute for just when the weather's bad and doing the occasional run on the treadmill, I think that that's totally fine. You know, especially this time of year, there's not as much daylight, and the conditions might not make it as safe to run outside for certain people. I think running on the treadmill is just fine. When it comes to faster speed workouts, things, you know, 5K pace and faster, it's Definitely better to do those outside if you can. Try to find a clear place to run, something that's been plowed down and de-iced. Because when you're running really fast, the treadmill is not a great substitute. But for most marathon type workouts, 5K to 10K pace, half marathon pace, tempo pace, marathon pace, that's all pretty easy to do on a treadmill. And one of the advantages of the treadmill is you can kind of just set the pace and be honest with it. You won't go too fast, you won't go too slow. You'll just do what you're supposed to do on the day. So it's a good substitute. I will say just a couple of tips for using the treadmill is you want to put as much variation into your running on the treadmill as possible. So one of the downfalls of a treadmill is every step is exactly the same. Two things that you can do to improve the variation that you're getting on the treadmill is to make sure that you switch up your shoes each time you run on it. Wear a different model, a different pair. It's going to affect how you impact the ground slightly differently. And then make sure you're putting some elevation in the treadmill throughout your run as well. Don't just run at the same elevation the whole time. But yeah, it's at least 90% as good as running outdoors. Scott's next question about winter running is, he says, when the weather is bad, would you modify the run's target pace to accommodate for the extra effort needed to run in the snow, slop, wind, cold, and with extra layers? Yeah, you definitely would. You always, when you do a workout, you want to think of what the intention of that workout is. And you want to do your best to try to run the pace. Not the pace. You want to do your best to run the effort level that's going to coordinate with the intended outcome of that workout. So if you're trying to run a hard day, in ideal conditions, a hard day, hard, fast interval workout, for example, might feel like 5K pace for you. And maybe 5K pace is, let me just make this up, 7 minutes per mile. But if it's cold, it's windy, it's the footing isn't too good and you're wearing extra layers and you feel like that's weighing you down or bulking you up in some way, then maybe what feels like 5K effort, rather than 7 minutes per mile on an ideal day, maybe it's 7:30 on that day. But to your body, it feels the same, even though you're going slower. So it's okay to go slower when the conditions are poor. And your body is probably feeling the same as if it was ideal. You can imagine if you forced the pace and you tried to run the exact same pace. Let's say, you tried to run 5K pace, but the effort was much harder on that day because of the bad conditions. You were actually probably running more like 1 mile race effort than you were 5K effort, even though the pace was the same. We need to learn to adapt to the weather and the conditions rather than fight it. The same thing goes for summer running. So, summer running, any temperature over 60 degrees Fahrenheit or so is going to slow us down. 5 degrees, 10 degrees, 20 degrees if it's, in the 70s, 30 seconds per mile, 5, 10s, 20 seconds per mile, 30 seconds per mile, even a minute per mile when it's really, really bad and humid. So we got to work with the weather and not fight against it. And Scott's final question, he asks if I have any favorite winter running gear. So I actually have an article on my website that's all about the best gear recommendations for winter running. So I'm going to link that in the show notes to this. And you can check out what I recommend there. But 3 things that I think are really, really helpful for me. First off is a pair of really warm insulated gloves. So my hands get really cold, really, really cold. And I run year round outside. I never use a treadmill. I don't own one. And when it's below 20 degrees, I still want to run. And I warm up. I feel fine after the first mile or 2, but my hands will get really, really cold. So I have these super insulated gloves. They're actually the type of gloves that like a crossing guard would use. Someone standing outside, they're actually high vis, which I think is helpful in the winter just for safety. High vis, they have some reflectivity on them, and they're super insulated mittens actually. I think I got them at the Working Gear store, which makes sense because they're like for a crossing guard or a police officer on outdoor detail, and they're great. They're great. They're not runner specific gloves. They don't need to be. They're very inexpensive and they work good. Um, that made a huge difference in my comfort running outside in the winter. The next thing, which I think is really helpful, and honestly, I don't use it too often, maybe only a few times per year, but it makes a huge difference for me, is I will, if it's going to be snowing at all on my run, and I don't obviously I don't run when it's snowing all that often, but a few times per year I will. I'll wear a pair of clear safety glasses, wraparound safety glasses, and it makes my vision so much better than if I was just running in the snow. I always find that if I'm running and I get caught in snowfall, the snow like gets in my eyes, makes it really hard to see. I need to squint really bad, and it's really really uncomfortable. But if you're wearing a pair of clear wraparound safety glasses, it's kind of like ski goggles, and it keeps the snow out of your eyes, and you can see well. So if I'm ever going out on like a long run or an easy run, and there's a chance of snow flurries, or maybe it's just flurrying a little bit, but I want to get my run in. Maybe it's snowing pretty heavily, and I just want to go out for a fun experience. I'll wear those safety glasses, and they really turn what would be kind of a miserable experience, just like not being able to see and squinting the whole time, into a nice one. And I can really enjoy the fun, unique aspect of running outside when it's snowing. And then the third thing that is really helpful in the winter is just having some reflective gear. I have ankle bands that I put around my ankles, and I have a couple different types of reflective vests. And I think they're really helpful for anyone who runs at night. And, even if you are running during the day and you're on roads that don't have sidewalks, I think that they're really helpful. A lot of times in the winter, sidewalks might not be plowed very well. You may need to go more into the road than you are accustomed to. And, roads are tighter. So I think the reflective gear is really helpful. You can pick up a set for very inexpensive, and then, you always have it when you might need it. If you're running out in the dark early in the morning or late at night, I think having reflective gear and maybe some sort of a light is very, very smart to do. All right. So that's my favorite pieces of winter running gear. If you want to get links to some of those items I mentioned and see the other recommendations that I have, check the link in the show notes to my article on favorite winter gear. All right. So thanks, Scott, for all those questions. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you as the listener, you learned something here today. And if you have any questions you'd like answered on the Knighton Runs podcast, you can support this show by joining at patreon.com/Knighton Runs and submit your questions through there. If you haven't already, be sure to get a copy of my book, Run Faster Marathons, The Proven Path to PR. I have a free preview edition of it, includes about 50% of the material in the book on my website. It's at knightonruns.com/book, and it's a great place to get started learning more about the marathon coaching that I teach and learn how to become a faster, more confident and strong runner. All right, that is all for today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope your running is going well. And until next time, have a good day.